This is the hidden threshold, a quiet crossing, a place where practice deepens and belief is examined from the inside. Here, we explore devotion without dogma, discernment without dismissal, ritual without performance, not as instruction, not as certainty, as a lived, evolving path. I'm Veyrin Vale. Let's begin. There's a peculiar, almost sly sensation that creeps in when you return to something familiar after being away for a while. It isn't the aftermath of some grand, cinematic farewell. There's no dramatic flinging of doors or tearful promises never to return. Instead, it's the slow kind of fading, the gentle drifting apart that's so subtle you barely notice it's happening. Days pass, one blending into the next, until suddenly you stop and realize, hold on, when was the last time I actually did this? It's always longer than you'd intended, slipping quietly through the cracks of everyday life. So you decide to come back. Maybe it's out of nostalgia, or a longing for comfort, or just a sudden urge. You set up your space exactly the way you remember. You arrange your tools, open old notebooks, dust off rituals that once felt second nature. You try to slip seamlessly back into those old patterns, certain that muscle memory or familiarity would carry you. But the sensation that washes over you isn't quite what you expected. It's not that things are wrong, nothing is broken or lost. Everything looks just as it did, but now it all feels slightly askew. It's like walking into your childhood home after years away. The furniture hasn't moved, the same pictures hang on the walls, but the air feels different. You hesitate, trying to recall which drawer holds the spoons or which light switch brightens the kitchen. Everything is recognizable, but you're moving through it with a small, persistent hesitance. That's the feeling I keep returning to, the subtle dissonance of familiarity and change. The truth is, we tell ourselves that if we ever pick up an old habit or practice, we'll slip right back in as if we never left. We imagine the activity as a loyal friend, patiently waiting for our return, unchanged and ready to resume together. For a brief, hopeful moment, that's almost true. There's that delightful flicker of recognition. Ah, this is it. I remember how this felt. The motions and rhythms come back, at least on the surface. But soon, the illusion cracks. A phrase that once flowed easily now feels stiff and forced. A gesture you used to make without thinking seems strange, your hands not quite obeying your memory. You go through the motions, but it's as if you're watching yourself act from across the room, slightly detached, sensing a gap between intention and execution. It's a strange kind of out-of-body experience, where you're present and yet not fully at home. Our first instinct is to blame ourselves. We worry we've lost some essential part, that the spark is gone, or that we've grown dull in our absence. It's easy to believe that the fault lies within, that the distance has cost us something irreplaceable. But I don't believe that's true. What's happening is subtler, and maybe even a bit magical. The real truth is that you've changed in your time away, in ways both small and profound. You're not the exact person who left this practice behind, and the practice itself, whether it's writing, painting, playing an instrument, or something else, remains as it was, waiting. There's a necessary period of reacquaintance, a slow and quiet process where you and the practice learn each other anew. It isn't about forcing yourself to be who you were or demanding that things feel instantly perfect. It's about giving yourself the grace to readjust, to let the connections reform in their own time. Returning, then, isn't a grand, heroic homecoming. It's gentler and more tentative, like those first moments reconnecting with an old friend you haven't seen in years. Conversation starts awkwardly, full of pauses and missteps, both of you searching for the old rhythm. But as you keep talking, memories stir and the ease begins to return. The friendship is still there, but it's changed. Enriched by absence, reshaped by all you've lived through in the meantime. So when you find yourself stepping back into something you once loved, don't be discouraged by the strangeness or the initial discomfort. That's just the natural process of two old companions, yourself and your practice, finding their way back to one another. Given time and patience, the awkwardness will fade, and a new, deeper familiarity will take its place. That's what returning truly feels like. Not a sudden, seamless reunion, but a gentle rediscovery, a slow settling in, until once again, it feels like home. We tell ourselves this little story before we come back, and honestly, most of the time, we don't even notice we're doing it. It goes something like this. Your practice has just been waiting there, patient and unchanged, off to the side, like a room in your house you haven't stepped into for a while. When you finally open the door, it'll be exactly as you left it. Same feeling, same air, same easy path to whatever made it matter in the first place. All you need to do is show up, and everything falls back into place. That's a really comforting idea, and weirdly, it's almost true, which is what makes it tricky. Because when you do come back, there's this moment, or sometimes a whole string of moments, where it all feels familiar. You think, yes, this is it. This is what I remembered. The shapes are right, the words, the way you used to settle your attention, it's all there. For a little while, it really does feel like coming home. But then, things start to feel a bit off. You reach for something specific, a feeling, a connection, a kind of presence you used to tap into without even thinking, but it's just not where you thought it would be. It's not missing exactly, it's just shifted somehow. You try again and again, and you keep missing it by a hair. Confusion creeps in, and it's hard to put your finger on because, honestly, nothing is actually wrong. Nothing's been broken or lost, but still, something just doesn't click. What you're bumping into is the gap between who you were when you left and who you are now. That old assumption that your practice would just hold your place, waiting to meet the old you, starts to come apart. We don't usually think about practice as something you have to reintroduce yourself to. We treat it more like a skill or a relationship, something that sticks around no matter how long you're away. But you aren't the same person. You've moved, whether you meant to or not. You were just living, but you changed. The weeks or months or however long you were gone reshaped you in ways you might not even notice at first. You can't come back from deep, internal work and just slide right back into your old patterns like nothing happened. Those patterns don't fit the same way because you don't fit the same way anymore. Even if the change is subtle, you've shifted, and now your practice needs to catch up. Here's the problem. Most of us misread this moment. We feel out of sync, so we start blaming ourselves. Something's wrong with me. I've lost it. I was away too long. The spark is gone, and I'm too far gone to find my way back. We reach for self-blame because, honestly, it's the first explanation that pops up. And I get it. If the problem is you, at least you can do something about it. Try harder, or be more disciplined. Push yourself until things click again. There's a messed up kind of comfort in thinking you can fix it if you just force it. But I don't buy that the dissonance means you failed. I think it's just information. It's telling you that the person who built that practice, who moved through those rituals on autopilot, who could drop into that state of mind so easily, that person has changed, has grown really, has been through things. And your practice, as steady as it is still set up for the old you, not the you standing here now. That gap isn't a sign something broke. It's a sign something moved. And that's actually good. That's what you wanted from the pause. The time away, the quiet, the deep work, the sitting with things instead of ignoring them. It was all supposed to change you. The discomfort you feel coming back is just the first sign that change actually happened, pressing up against the old shape of your life. It's definitely not comfortable, but it's absolutely real. The question isn't, can you get back to where you were? No, you can't. Not exactly. And honestly, you probably wouldn't want to. The real question is whether you can figure out where you are now and let your practice meet you there. You do what makes sense. You show up and go through the motions, light the candle, say the words, set everything up the way it's supposed to be. You follow the steps, just like always, hoping that maybe, just maybe, if you do it right, the feeling will come. That the old form will somehow pull you back in the way it used to. And you know what? Sometimes that actually happens. That's important to say straight away because it's just true. Sometimes, just moving through the ritual cracks something open inside you. Your body remembers before your mind does. There's a certain focus that rituals can almost force, but not in a cheap or shallow way. It's like any practice thing. If you've done it long enough, it can still shift something deep within you, even when you don't feel it at first. Meaning lives in the form, and you don't have to feel it on cue. You just keep moving. But not always. Sometimes you do everything right and feel nothing. Not even that meaningful emptiness people talk about. Just flatness. You're aware you're just going through the motions, and there's a little part of you watching from the outside, a bit disappointed, knowing this just isn't working. That's its own kind of discomfort. Now you're not only wrestling with whatever made you feel disconnected in the first place, but you're also dealing with the frustration of having tried and still coming up empty. That act your way back in approach, which felt hopeful at first, starts to seem a little hollow. Like you're saying lines in a language you used to know, but the meaning doesn't come. Here's where it gets messy. I don't think there's anything fake about performing the practice. Sometimes that's actually the bridge. It's a way to stay in touch when you can't feel the connection directly. Showing up and doing the work, even when it feels empty, is its own kind of faithfulness. It says, I'm still here. I still believe this matters, even if I can't feel it right now. There's real integrity in that. The trouble isn't the performance. The trouble comes when the performance becomes a substitute for the thing it was supposed to make room for. When you're just going through the motions as a replacement for presence, not as a path toward it. When nailing the steps becomes the whole point and you stop noticing that somewhere along the way, you lost the connection you were after. It's a subtle shift, easy to miss. From the outside, or even from certain angles inside yourself, it still looks like devotion. You're showing up, you're keeping the practice, but there's a spark missing. Something that used to live in the words and gestures and just isn't there now. And if you're honest, you know it. That honesty, that's the heart of it. Not the feeling, not whether you did it right or whether the magic happened. What matters is whether you can stay honest about what's really happening. Are you using the form as a doorway, or have you settled in the doorway and started calling it the room? Once you see that clearly, something changes. The pressure to force your way back in relaxes. You stop demanding that the ritual deliver the feeling every time. You stop diagnosing yourself when it falls flat, and you start asking a new question. Not, am I doing this right? But, what does this moment really need? Sometimes it needs the whole form, the structure, the sequence, the careful steps. There's a real power in that, and sometimes nothing else will do. And sometimes it needs something else entirely. Most of us begin our journeys with a practice that's carefully arranged, shaped by clear outlines and familiar steps. There's comfort in this structure. The ritual with a defined opening, a measured middle, a satisfying conclusion. You say the established words, arrange your tools or intentions in their proper places, and follow the sequence as it has always been laid out. The process is deliberate, almost ceremonial in its precision. You know you're on the right path because you can measure yourself against a form, against something tangible, something with edges and rules. It's a reassuring anchor. The boundaries clarify where you stand. This kind of structured practice is not just a matter of heritage or obedience to old forms. The structure itself carries significance. It's not empty tradition, but meaning distilled into repetition and order. When you step into a ritual that has been formed over generations, or even one you've refined for yourself through years of trial and error, you're entering into a relationship with something enduring. There's a weight to it, a sense of being held by something larger than yourself. The repetition isn't just rote. It's where the magic happens, where something subtle and invisible gathers force through pattern. The precision isn't about rigidity for its own sake, it's about giving shape to intention, helping you find your footing when everything else feels uncertain. That kind of practice can be a lifeline. It can carry you through times of confusion or chaos, when you need to rest inside something familiar and proven. It's tempting in moments of upheaval or restlessness to believe that structure is the problem. If things feel stale or empty, it must be the form that failed you. Maybe you swing hard toward informality, convinced that what you need is less ceremony and more freedom. But I've learned that the issue isn't with the structure itself. It's with the way we relate to it. It's the expectations and judgments we bring, and the rigidity or anxiety we let build up around doing things the right way. Eventually, I discovered another way to practice, one that, at first, felt almost illegitimate. It barely looked like a ritual at all. There were no rehearsed lines, no prescribed sequence, no checklists to keep me honest. Sometimes it was nothing more than sitting still and naming what was real for me in that moment. Sometimes it was a conversation, me with myself, or with something greater, or with the silence. There was no performance, no need to play at devotion or chase after a feeling. It was just presence, an honest reckoning with what was actually there, not what I wished would be. For a long while, I dismissed this as insufficient. It felt too relaxed, too unguarded, like showing up to a sacred space in jeans and wondering if I was disrespecting the place. I had absorbed the idea that the more formal the practice, the more genuine the intention. That if I wasn't doing it according to inherited rules, it didn't really count. But over time, I came to see that this was another kind of illusion. A belief that only the hard, structured work was real. That only the elaborate forms could hold the weight of longing or sorrow or gratitude. But life isn't lived at the extremes. These forms, structured and unstructured, ceremonial and spontaneous, aren't opposites in a tug of war. They're simply different languages, suited to different moments. The real skill, the deeper wisdom, lies in listening for what the moment is asking from you. There are times when the gravity of tradition, the architecture of ritual, is exactly what you need. You need the steadiness of the steps, the way ceremony can cradle you when you're too raw or scattered to create meaning on your own. In those moments, the form isn't a cage, but a kindness. It's a structure that holds you up, that helps you remember who you are or what you love when distraction or distress threatens to scatter you. Yet, not every moment calls for such ceremony. Sometimes, the most sacred thing you can do is abandon the trappings, lay aside the scripts, and meet the moment with unvarnished honesty. There are times when the heart wants only to be seen as it is, without fanfare, without preamble. If you try to force a ritual onto such a moment, you risk missing what's alive. It's like reciting a well-crafted speech when what's needed is simple, spontaneous conversation. A response that's alive to the present, not bound to what you thought you'd say. The most perfect performance, in those moments, falls flat because it's disconnected from what's real. The real challenge is allowing yourself the freedom to discern and choose. Especially if you come from a background where formality was equated with respect, where improvisation was frowned upon, and where directness felt like laziness or even irreverence. These ingrained beliefs can linger, even after you've intellectually granted yourself permission to be flexible. There may still be a watchful inner voice, alert to any deviation from what's proper, quick to judge you for not doing it right. This is the part of us that clings to certainty, that finds comfort in the familiar choreography of ritual, even when it no longer fits the reality of the moment. Sometimes you have to gently set that voice aside. It's not a rejection of structure or tradition, but rather an act of respect for what's true right now. For this evening, this practice, this tender or tumultuous stretch of time, you might need to show up in a different way. The absence of formality doesn't mean the absence of reverence. In fact, it can be its own kind of devotion, a willingness to meet the sacred as it is, not as you think it should be. Ultimately, devotion isn't measured by the complexity of your rituals or the perfection of your practice. It's measured by your willingness to be real, to listen, to respond to what's actually here. Some nights, that means lighting the candle, saying the words, moving through the motions with care and intention. Other nights, it means speaking from the heart, letting silence speak for you, or simply being present to yourself and to whatever mystery you're in conversation with. This isn't a lesser form of practice. It's another way of participating in the ongoing conversation between you and the world, between you and the sacred. The truest devotion is responsive, alive, and willing to be changed by what it encounters. Whether in the steadiness of ceremony or the looseness of honest presence, the point is not to perform, but to connect, to bring your whole self into the moment, however that moment asks to be met. Let me tell you about a certain kind of moment. Honestly, it took me a lot longer than I'd like to realize it even counted as practice. There's no big lead up, no intentions set, no careful arranging of the space. Sometimes I'm wiped out, distracted, or just running on empty after a long day. I don't have it in me to go through the motions of a full-on ritual, but I'm not ready to skip practice either. So I just sit down and I talk. Not the polished, thoughtful kind of talking you do in a ritual. More like the way you talk to someone you know so well that you've stopped bothering to edit yourself. You're honest about the stupid stuff, honest about the heavy stuff, honest about not knowing where the line is between the two. There's no structure, no story with a nice, tidy arc. Just, well, here's where I'm at. Here's what's weighing on me. Here's what I have no clue how to carry. And there's something about showing up that way, totally unguarded, where it feels like something meets you there. I'm not going to pretend I know exactly what that something is. I'm not interested in giving it a label or a neat answer. But those unscripted moments have a kind of presence I can't always find in the more formal stuff. It feels like real contact, not just performing some idea of contact. It's the difference between actually talking to someone and giving a speech at them. For a long time, I thought this didn't count. Too messy, too casual, not worthy of devotion. I figured the gods, however you think about that word, deserve more than just your tired, rambling self showing up with nothing fancy to offer. Like it was rude to come empty-handed to something sacred. But I don't believe that anymore. I look at the relationships in my own life that go the deepest. Almost none of them got there through perfect presentations. They got there in the moments when the act dropped and someone finally said the real thing, not just the right thing. When you sit across from someone and there's nothing between you but the truth, something about that rawness creates a closeness you can't fake with careful conversation. So why would it be different with the divine? If devotion is basically a relationship, and that's how I see it, then it's got to be big enough to hold the messy moments too. A relationship that only works when you're performing isn't really a relationship at all. It's just theater. And honestly, I don't think the gods care about your performance. I think they want you. For me, the table is a real image of this, not as a metaphor. I mean literally sitting down the way you do with someone who knows you so well, you can just be however you are that day. Tired, confused, carrying something you're embarrassed to bring into the formal space because it doesn't seem spiritual enough or worthy. You just put it on the table and say, here, this is what I've got. There's an intimacy in that, a kind of closeness that the structured practice, as great as it is, doesn't always touch. And you know what? It goes both ways. That's the part I never saw coming. When you start from a place of honest presence, the conversation actually moves. Maybe not in some big, dramatic way, but there's a real exchange that gets lost when you're buried under layers of form. When you drop the script, you drop some of the static between you and whatever or whoever you're talking to. Sometimes, in that quieter space, you can actually hear the other side. That's not a lesser devotion. If anything, it asks more of you. Rituals and forms give you something to lean on when you don't have the energy or focus on your own. That matters. That's real. But showing up with nothing but your real self, your honesty, and your longing to connect, that's different. There's nothing to hide behind. It just asks you to be there. No script, no armor. And from what I've seen, that kind of showing up is never wasted. If you've picked up something again, whether it's a routine, a spiritual thing, a connection to something bigger than yourself, and it feels off, hey, that's okay. Here's what I want you to remember. You don't have to get all the way back to where you were. That old place mattered, sure. Everything you built there, still real, still yours. But you're not the same person anymore, and honestly, your practice knows it, even if you haven't caught up yet. That weird feeling, that little disconnect between what you hope for and what actually shows up, that's not a mistake. That's how something new gets started. Practice was never about coming back exactly as you left. It just wants you to come back as yourself, honestly. And honest can look a lot of different ways. Maybe you're all in, doing every step with intention, honoring the old rituals. Or maybe you just show up, sit down, no plan, and admit, this is what I've got today. This is what's real for me right now. Both count, both matter. What doesn't work? Pretending to be your old self. You've changed. Let that be a part of it. So if you're in that shaky, unfamiliar place, if you're still figuring it out, still feeling like your hands remember more than your heart, just stay with it. No need to rush. Let the practice meet you here, not in some memory of who you used to be. It'll find you. It pretty much always does. And until then, the candle is enough. The quiet is enough. Even just turning toward it with nothing else is enough. That's how it starts. Every single time. If something here stayed with you, you don't need to resolve it. Let it unfold in its own time. There's also writing from this same place, brief letters on Substack, and longer reflections on Medium. I'm Veyrin Vale, and this has been The Hidden Threshold, a project of Obscura Meridian.